Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now firstly I'd like to say thank you on behalf of myself and my sister actually for your kind words and support over on the Classic Gaming in HD channel. She put her first video up the other day, got some really nice comments, got some really nice feedback, and if you want to you can go and check that out. I'll leave a link down below. Moving on to the subject of today's video though, and you may remember that in the last one we bought a refurbished Lenovo Legion PC. Safe to say there were a few issues with that system and I've been troubleshooting it the past week. One of the things I decided to do was actually take the 1060 out of it and then test it in a different system, and while I was doing that I thought, why don't we actually benchmark this card to see how well it's holding up these days. It'll be a great way to gauge how it performs in modern games, and it'll be a good way for us to see whether or not the graphics card is causing the problem. So some of you aptly named this card the RX 1060 because it's the most AMD looking Nvidia card I've ever seen. It's an MSI OEM model reserved for pre-built, I believe, and it shares the same specifications as a reference Nvidia card, so you're getting the same clock speeds, memory speeds, and of course the 6 gigs of VRAM that is present on a lot of 1060s. The other option of course being the 3 gig card, which I'm still working on obtaining, so hopefully I'll be able to find one of those as well and we can do a few comparisons. But during my tests today I actually found that the 1060 still seems to be a pretty cheese. The 1060 still seems to be a pretty capable. I just can't speak today, I might as well give up. Here's how the card performs in 2021. So in Assassin's Creed Valhalla I decided to start with the medium preset, but I dropped a couple of the demanding options like anti-aliasing and water to low. Doing so gave us a nice FPS boost up from around the mid to low 40s to around 50 instead. I think these settings give us that nice balance between visual quality and performance at 1080p. I always try and stick to native resolution where possible, though if you want a constant 60 FPS plus in modern games, then it's either not going to be possible or you'll need to sacrifice the resolution. Having said that though, this isn't the same for all titles, and what you do with the settings is all about personal preference. In first-person competitive titles, however, like Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, the more frames the better, and fortunately with some tweaking we were able to enjoy this game at 1920 by 1080 with settings that were mostly made up of medium and low, though we were able to take advantage of the high texture quality thanks to the 6 gigs of VRAM. This may be more of a challenge with the 3 gig card, but when I find another one we'll have to try that out. Black Ops Cold War then, with the 1060, is running fine, and it seems as though this specific card is working fine as well. Being the blower style card, it does get up to around 80 degrees pretty quickly, but it doesn't throttle or get particularly loud, which is always a bonus. The stock Intel CPU cooler I'm using, however, is making far more noise. The card will offer a somewhat respectable experience in Cyberpunk 2077 as well, a notorious game to run. Cyberpunk is a challenge on most hardware, so I'm always thankful for a plus 30 FPS experience. We were actually getting closer to 50, and this was with the medium textures enabled as well. The crowd density option was set to low, though this is more of a CPU intensive setting. I generally keep it on low as sort of a default option when testing different graphics cards. This game still looks really great even with the reduced visual quality, and I could happily play it through like this with this frame rate as well. I was far too lenient with Grand Theft Auto 5 settings, I think. I used a mixture of high and medium. High or very high would have probably been fine for 60 FPS to be honest, but I wasn't expecting the frame rate to be quite so high, even with these options. Advanced settings were turned off, as always, and so was MSIA, because personally I think the performance sacrifice isn't worth the visual difference, and I usually just stick to FXAA instead. I do keep wondering about the 3 gig 1060 though, and what it would do or how it would do with equivalent settings, because so far all of the games that we've tried out have used close to, or in fact more than, 3 gigabytes of GPU VRAM. I remember thinking that the 3 gig card was fine when I bought one years ago, and it was, but An up-to-date comparison would be very interesting, especially in modern titles. GTA 5 will probably run similar on both cards because it is slightly older and uses less VRAM, but everything else, well, it's hard to tell until we test. In Red Dead Redemption 2 I started off with Digital Foundry's console equivalent settings but dropped a few options here and there for the sake of retaining a higher 1% low frame rate, as going through Valentine caused some noticeable performance drops, and this will be the same for Saint Denis as well. With today's chosen settings, the game ran very well. Now don't get me wrong, as someone who's played this on PlayStation and Xbox at 30 FPS, I'm fine with that frame rate, but when you're dropping from say 50 FPS to 32 FPS on PC in an instant, well, it can be quite off-putting, hence my slight reduction in graphical quality. The game would also look amazing, even if you wanted to just put the textures on high and set everything else to low, because low in this game by default still looks really good, apart from the texture quality. The textures can look really muddy at anything lower than medium, to be fair. In Dirt 5 I went with the medium preset but turned down a few options, and just like in Call of Duty I ended up with the best looking 60 FPS experience that this card could handle. Almost anyway. 59 was the average here. Call of Duty probably still had a little more room to adjust a few things, but Dirt 5 is best suited to medium for a smooth experience. Now you could of course go with high and still see a decent frame rate, or maybe even choose very high if you don't mind 30 FPS, it's always up to you. Either way, Dirt 5 seems more demanding than it looks, and it's far more GPU dependent as well, because it will run on really weak CPUs, and it's quite amusing to pair a RTX 2060 with a Core 2 quad and watch this game run fine. I hope anyway, maybe that's something I'll try actually. Finally then, it's Watch Dogs Legion. This did a much better job than I thought, albeit with the low settings. I turned a couple of other options down or off as well, including switching anti-aliasing to FXAA and disabling depth of field and motion blur simply for personal preference. I guess it's not too much to ask of the 1060 to hit close to or exceed 60 FPS in some games, even at 1080p after all, and to be honest, it held up better than I thought it would. Like everything, it's a shame about the pricing on used cards right now, but if you do by some miracle find a cheap 1060 or a pre-built with one inside, then it's going to provide a respectable gaming experience even now in 2021, though of course performance per game will differ. Does that make sense? You know what I mean, I hope. The performance will differ depending on the games that you want to play. Now, of course, it's nice to see then that this 1060 is working, because part of troubleshooting that Lenovo gaming PC was actually seeing if the card was the issue, and I'm glad to see that it wasn't. So now my suspicions rest with either the motherboard or more likely the power supply. So I'm almost done testing out those components as well, and yeah, I will pretty much explain what has happened hopefully in the next video if I don't get distracted and film something else in the meantime. But thanks for watching this one. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.